These are stories that most prefer to ignore. The beauty of travel has a dark side for those who dare to explore the world with black skin. These are the silenced voices you need to hear. The silencing gaze, invisibility, and hypervisibility in distant lands. Your hair is so exotic. Can I touch it? Confused with the other? The price of skin color? Where are you really from? Here are 5 stories of black travelers recounting their experiences in a world that prefers to look through colored glasses. Their strength and resilience in the face of everyday racism will inspire you. The courage to be themselves in a world that wants to put them in a box. Their stories will resonate with anyone who has ever felt different or unwelcome. Prepare to listen, reflect, and learn. And remember, your perspective can change the world. Welcome to our channel. Let's get started. Story 1. The Silencing Gaze. Invisibility and hypervisibility in distant lands. Character: Aisha, a 32-year-old photographer, traveling solo through Southeast Asia. Aisha's camera had always been her best friend, capturing the ephemeral beauty of the world. But on her journey through Southeast Asia, she noticed that she herself often became the object of a fixed and silent gaze. In vibrant markets where vendors smiled warmly at other tourists, Aisha felt a void, as if her presence were transparent, uninteresting, ignored requests, withheld information, the feeling of being a ghost amidst the liveliness. However, this invisibility paradoxically coexisted with moments of disconcerting hypervisibility. In smaller villages, far from traditional tourist routes, Aisha invariably attracted prolonged gazes, curious to the point of being invasive. Not a look of admiration for the traveler, but a scrutiny of her color, the texture of her hair, her very existence in that place. There was the time she tried to photograph an ancient temple and felt dozens of pairs of eyes fixed on her, not on the monument. Or when, in a picturesque cafe, she noticed that her table was the only one where the waiter was slow to arrive, avoiding eye contact. Aisha felt sometimes erased, sometimes like a freak on display. This exhausting duality made her question whether her search for beauty through the lens was not being overshadowed by the lens of others' prejudice. The joy of discovery was always accompanied by the need to decipher gazes, to make herself visible when they wanted to ignore her, and to become invisible when the observation was oppressive. The journey, which should have been a celebration of the world's diversity, sometimes became a painful mirror of its lack. Story 2. Seu cabelo é tão exótico, posso tocar? A linha tênue entre curiosidade e invasão. Personagem: Imani, uma estudante de direito de 25 anos, em intercâmbio cultural na Europa. Imani always loved the texture and versatility of her corset strands. It was a crown that she wore with pride. But during her internship in Europe, that same crown became the target of an invasive and disconcerting curiosity. Strangers with a mix of fascination and lack of tact felt comfortable to make comments about her curls, often without even knowing her. The most frequent question, invariably accompanied by a hand extended, was, "Your hair is so exotic, can I touch it?" At first, Imani tried to be polite, explaining that her hair was not a zoo exhibit, but persistence and lack of understanding left her more and more exhausted and uncomfortable. There was the lady at the market who tried to caress her curls without asking permission, as if they were a pet, or the group of young people on the subway who were whispering and pointing, one of them approaching to ask if it hurt to have that kind of hair. Imani felt her body invaded, her individuality reduced to a physical trait that seemed to fascinate and at the same time alienate the others. What should have been an experience of cultural immersion and learning became in many moments a constant negotiation of limits. Imani realized that she needed to create an invisible barrier to protect herself from that predatory curiosity, learning to dodge, respond firmly, and sometimes simply to ignore it. The beauty of her curls, which for her was an expression of her identity, turned in foreign lands into an unsolicited invitation to touch and comment. Story 3. Confused with the other, racial stereotypes and the loss of individual identity while traveling. Character: Keisha, a 40-year-old software engineer attending a technology conference in the Middle East. Keisha traveled to the Middle East to attend an important conference in her area. She expected to exchange ideas with colleagues, present her work, and expand her professional network. What she did not expect was to be constantly confused with the hotel cleaning staff or with other black participants, as if the color of her skin automatically placed her in a predefined and limiting category and stripped her of her individuality. In the elevator, a conference colleague assumed she knew where the service room was. At the breakfast buffet, a waiter handed her a staff menu. In networking conversations, it was common for people to ask if she was also part of a delegation from a specific African country, even though she identified herself as American. Keisha felt her professional identity and individuality being erased by racial stereotypes. Her expertise and accomplishments seemed invisible to many who saw her first through the lens of her race. It was exhausting to have to constantly reaffirm who she was, what her role was, and what she had achieved. Frustration piled up with each new confusion, with each look that put her in a prefab box. Keisha realized that in addition to standing out in her field, she also needed to fight to be seen as an individual professional, and not as a generic representation of a racial group. The conference, which should have been a space of recognition and advancement, became, in part, a constant battle against the erasure of her identity. Story 4. The price of skin color, discrimination in services and the feeling of not being welcome. Personagem: Maya, uma professora de inglês de 28 anos, de férias na América do Sul. Maya always dreamed of exploring the vibrant landscapes of South America. But during her vacation, she encountered a discriminatory treatment that made her question whether her presence was truly desired in some places. The color of her skin seemed to carry an invisible price, manifesting itself in less attentive service, suspicious looks, and the subtle but painful feeling of not being welcome. At a craft store, Maya noticed that the saleswoman attended other customers with smiles and readiness, but spoke to her with a dry and impatient tone. At a restaurant, her order took much longer to arrive, and the check came with a mistake in her favor, as if they assumed she wouldn't notice. When she tried to book an excursion, she noticed that the vacancies mysteriously ran out when she called, but remained available online. These small incidents, accumulated throughout the trip, created an atmosphere of discomfort and exclusion. Maya felt that she had to work harder to be treated with the same respect given to other tourists. The joy of exploring new places was constantly undermined by the feeling of being seen as less, as if her presence were an exception or an inconvenience. The experience made her reflect on the privilege enjoyed by other travelers who could enjoy the journey without having to constantly fight for fair and equal treatment. The vacation, which should be a moment of relaxation and discovery, became in part a painful lesson on the persistent impact of racial discrimination. Story 5. De onde você é de verdade? A eternal question and the sensation of not belonging even as a tourist. Personagem: Zola, a 35-year-old jazz musician on tour in Eastern Europe. Zola was traveling through Eastern Europe to share her music, a universal language that she believed transcended borders. However, the insistent question that arose after her shows was always the same. Yes, but where are you really from? Even when she replied with her nationality, the questioning continued as if there was an implicit disbelief that she could be from that place. After a show in a small club, a spectator insisted on knowing her true origin, speculating about African countries, even after Zola explained that she was born and raised in the United States. During a casual encounter, when she mentioned her hometown, the answer was a dubious look followed by, "But you seem different." This insistence on questioning her identity made her feel as if her nationality and personal history were constantly being invalidated, and that her appearance betrayed her as a foreigner even though she was a tourist. Zola realized that she needed to arm herself with patience to answer the same question over and over again, explaining her story to people who seemed to have difficulty accepting her identity as she presented it. Music, which was her way of connecting with the world, was sometimes preceded by the need to justify her own existence in that space. The tour, which should have been a celebration of the universality of art, became in part a constant reaffirmation of her right to belong. As we conclude this journey through these powerful stories, take a moment to reflect on the experiences shared by Aisha, Imani, Keisha, Maya, and Zola. Their strength and resilience in the face of everyday racism are inspiring. Let us recognize that the fight for equality and respect is a collective task and that every voice, every story, and